Okay, we left off right here where the bolus was entering the stomach and Phil had heartburn. We talked about the lower esophageal sphincter. Let's move into the stomach. So here is what the stomach looks like if you opened it up. So you can see that there are lots of folds. So the stomach is lined with these what are called mucosal folds for stretching. The function of the stomach is to, of course, hold food. And it mixes food with gastric juices so that the digestion process can begin. It actually begins in the mouth a little bit with those salivary enzymes that are excreted, but for the most part, digestion happens after the mouth. And here we see in the stomach, in these mucosal folds, you can imagine that if a big meal was eaten, say at your favorite restaurant, your stomach is going to really expand in size. So the stomach can expand quite a bit, and you have felt that before. So sometimes if you know you're going to eat a lot and you want to really enjoy your food, elastic waistbands are a nice thing. So your stomach will stretch a lot. All right, so I told you that the stomach excretes gastric juices. So what are gastric juices? Well, gastric juice contains three things. So the first is water. We need to liquefy the food that we eat, the bolus, to what is called chyme. So this is what the bolus of food turns into in the stomach. It gets broken down to a high degree, and it gets mixed with these gastric juices and forms chyme. Hydrochloric acid is another component of gastric juice, HCl. We know this is a very strong acid. It actually denatures proteins. So imagine these proteins all clumped up, and then once they come into contact with hydrochloric acid, it unravels these proteins so that digestion can occur. And it also activates digestive enzymes. Digestive enzymes are another component of gastric juice, and these enzymes, remember how we said enzymes speed up chemical reactions, so these enzymes help to break down the nutrients that we eat. Okay, so our stomach is very strong. We have three types of muscles that all run in different directions. If we start down here, these are the longitudinal muscles. So you can see this is a cross section of the stomach. So here is where our food would be. And here is where these gastric juices are excreted. And then if we just cut right down in here, we can see a cross section of some of these cells. And we can see that the outer wall of the stomach is composed of muscle. So almost half of this, this thickness is the muscles. So longitudinal, and then we have muscles running the other way, perpendicular to the longitudinal muscles, and these are the circular muscles. And then we have our obliques, and they're actually running, you can't see this in this cross section, but they're running diagonal to the other muscles. So what you get is these three layers of muscles that really allow for good mixing, good churning to really churn up our food and get it broken down. And it's during this process that the bolus of food is mixed with gastric juices to form what is called chyme. Okay, so as the food moves through the stomach, little bits, a couple teaspoonfuls at a time, of chyme leave the stomach through the pyloric sphincter. So here's our second sphincter. So the pyloric sphincter is what separates the small intestines from the stomach. And so that pyloric sphincter will open up, let a few teaspoons of chyme through, and then it will close. And then again, it will open up and keep letting some food bit by bit move from the stomach to the intestines. All right, so let's move into the intestines. So here is the stomach, just to orient you. Here was that pyloric sphincter. And the food moves through the small intestines, which are composed of three parts: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. So here they are listed, and you can see them here in this photo. The major function of these small intestines is absorption of nutrients. So the small intestines, this is really the place where the vast majority of nutrients get absorbed, get taken up, and transported to where they are needed in the body. let's take a look at what the inside of our intestines, our small intestines, look like. So here you can see, here's this tube, our small intestine, and you can see there are these folds. And if we take a little cross section of these folds, here you can see they sort of look like these waves. So these are the mucosal folds. Now each mucosal fold has many of these little finger-like projections. These are called villi. Villus is the singular form of this word. Villi, many villi, one villus. So our mucosal folds have many villi on them, and this is to increase surface area. So I told you that the main function of the small intestine was to digest our food and absorb the food. This is where absorption comes in. And in order to absorb all this food, there needs to be a very high surface area in the small intestines. So we have these villi that serve to increase the surface area. And if we take one of these villi and look at it closely, here you can see what it looks like. So here is a villus up close. And the villi are composed of these cells that are called enterocytes. So these cells are called enterocytes, and on these enterocytes are microvilli. So each villus is composed of enterocytes that contain all these microvilli. Let's take another look. So here, these three structures that I just told you about, their job is to increase the surface area of the small intestine. So we have these mucosal folds. These mucosal folds have lots of villi, and each villus has cells, enterocytes, that contain on their surface microvilli, many, many microvilli. So the diameter of our small intestines is only about 1 inch, but they're about 10 feet long, our small intestines. And here is a picture of these microvilli. This is a scanning electron micrograph showing these microvilli that line the mucosal folds of our intestines. So between the mucosal folds, the villi, and the microvilli, these three things increase the surface area of the small intestine by about 600 times the surface area of a cylinder that would be the same diameter and length. So you can see how these three things really increase the surface area of our small intestine. Okay, let's talk about each of these. So I showed you what these mucosal folds look like and how they're covered with each of these villi. There are about 20 to 40 villi per millimeter squared in our intestines, so that's a lot. If we break this down, if we look at each individual villus, so here is a villus, here is another one, so we have two villi here. And if we take a closer look at these villi, here again we can see these enterocytes, these absorptive cells, and these line each of the villi. And then on the inside here, we have these capillaries. So you can see here that lining the villus are these capillaries. And then interior to the capillaries is this lacteal. So this is what this lacteal is it's a channel of the lymphatic system. And there's one within each villus. And this lacteal and these capillaries are here in order to transport the nutrients that get broken down in these enterocytes, to transport them to the rest of the body. Okay, so we are zooming into these enterocytes, these digestive cells, and here you can see on the edge of them are the microvilli. This is called the brush border of these enterocytes. So you can imagine these little particles of food, and there's all this surface area. So these are really, really great at absorbing all of our nutrients. There are 2,000 to 4,000 microvilli per cell. We can never draw these enterocytes accurately to represent that many microvilli. Okay, and then you can see in these cells here, there are enzymes that are located both at the brush border and within the enterocytes, and these are responsible for the completion of the digestion process. So these nutrients are taken in and they are broken down by these enzymes. Okay, so how do these nutrients get to where they need to be? Well, water-soluble nutrients, so hydrophilic nutrients, like our carbohydrates, for example, are absorbed into the capillaries of the vascular system and transported through the hepatic portal vein to the liver. We'll talk about the liver more, but here you can see our small intestine. As nutrients get absorbed, they leave the villi or the villus by these capillaries or by the lacteal, depending on what it is. And they go from the small intestine to the liver through the hepatic portal vein. And then fats, we know that fats are hydrophobic. They don't like water. They're unable to be directly absorbed into the capillaries, and so they're absorbed into this lacteal, where they're brought to the lymphatic system. Okay, so we're still in the small intestine, and remember I told you about peristalsis. I want to remind you this is still happening in the intestine, so we've got all these nutrients being absorbed from this bolus of food that is constantly being pushed through the intestines by peristalsis, this muscular wave that pushes the bolus through.